Started. Welcome everybody to On the Menu. It's Thursday, April the 23rd, 2020. Hope everybody's staying safe and staying away from the nasty coronavirus. Today we have one of the most famous people in all of Alamogordo. That's Marianne Schweers, and she's going to share with us a little bit about her story with her business and how she's handled that. So Marianne, the first thing I would like you to do is tell us a little bit about where you grew up and a little bit about your life story.
Okay. Well, first of all, you have to realize you're dealing with a couple of hicks from the sticks. We're both from rural Nebraska, a little town of Wisner, population 1,200. And over the years, I guess the same amount of people die as are born. So the population never changes. It's 1,200. George and I met in high school. He had gone to a one-room school for the first 8 years and then went to high school at Wisner High. And I was a class behind him. So he was sophomore and I'm freshman. And at the beginning of the school year, George's buddies and he are looking over the new crop of freshman girls. And I happened to be standing beside some kids that hadn't developed maybe quite as soon as I had. So I had the biggest boobs. So George punched his buddies and said, that's her, I'm going to date that one. And so true to form, I was George's first date in high school. And we dated off and on in high school. And George was born and raised on a farm about 10 miles out of town. And by the time he was a senior, he had been given the responsibility for managing a lot of that farm. And his plan was that when he graduated from high school, he was going to go to that family farm and run it probably for the rest of his life. But then a couple of weeks after graduation, or actually a couple of weeks before University of Nebraska started classes in the fall, his mom said, well, you're going to get packed out here because you're going to go to college, which was not in George's plan, but his folks had decided that farming was really a risky business. And so he needed to have something to fall back on. So they had decided he would attend college and select a major that was not agriculture, so it would be different. And so, not as a very happy camper, he then in 2 weeks was a college student and going after a degree in mechanical engineering. So he was in college at Lincoln, and then after I graduated from high school the next year, I went to nurses training in Omaha to a hospital school of nursing. And we would go back and forth. George would ride back and forth from Omaha to Lincoln and a lot during that time because we were both getting adjusted to a lifestyle we had never experienced before. So we decided after several years of doing that we should just get married and save all that gas money, because he was doing all this driving back and forth. But we had to convince our parents that being married students was really a great idea, and especially because in Nebraska in the 50s, you just didn't get married if you were underage, and neither George or I were 21, so we had to convince both of our parents that it was such a great idea that they would go down to the county courthouse with us and give their consent so that marriage license could be issued. And to convince our folks that this was such a good deal that we get married, we made out a budget. Man, we had all the figures in line, just how we were going to save all this money and how we were going to make it work. And we did a convincing plan. They bought it. And so they went to the courthouse with us and gave their consent to get married. So that was probably the first thing that we learned together, that we needed to do our homework, get a plan going, and then go after it with enthusiasm. So that was probably, that's our history. That's our beginning.
So, Marianne, did either of you come from a family that had wealth when you were growing up?
No, I think you described it well the other day when you said, a lot of my friends are from the lower middle class, and that was us. We certainly, his folks, had always farmed. My folks had a different business and lived on the outskirts of Wisner. Believed that kids ought to have chores, so we milked cows before we went to school. But it was also a necessity. We grew our own food. We fed ourselves.
So, Marianne, do you think if you had been born into a rich family that you would have viewed things differently as far as developing the business that you have now? Or do you think it helped you coming from a lower middle class family?
Absolutely helped. As I said, we raised our own food, but you had to be creative. Things just weren't there because of the family finances. You had to figure it out. And I think that was true of both George's family and my family both. And that was such a help as far as us having the same background and thinking the same way, but a real plus, absolutely.
And how do you think your parents instilling work values helped you later in your life?
Well, you weren't afraid of work. It was part of your lifestyle. That's how you accomplished things. You didn't wait for somebody else to do it for you. You knew that you had to find a way on your own to figure it out. And that was absolutely critical, because that's what we've done all the way through, is realize that it was us. We had to figure it out. Nobody else was going to do it for us.
So if your parents had babied you growing up, do you think that would have been a hindrance to you down the road? Absolutely.
The babying wasn't part of my folks, their repertoire. When I graduated from high school, probably the week of graduation, my dad had told me, now you'll start paying rent this next week. I was furious, absolutely furious that I was expected to pay rent on the room I had slept in all my life. But that was just standard, and that was the way it was. And so I had to find a job to make enough money to pay the rent on my room. So
how much was it?
Oh gosh, I don't even remember how much it was. I just remember how mad I was that I had to pay it.
Okay. You had 10 lessons that you sent me. Would you like to talk about the second one now? You just talked about the first one.
Okay. Well, the second one, George had an older brother who was married and had kids, and his kids called their folks by their first name. And that really irked George. He came home one day and said, we're a family, you and me, we're the team. And in this family, you're the mom and I'm the dad. And I don't care if we never have kids, but you're the mom in this family, I'm the dad. And from that day forward, we had called each other mom and dad. Our college friends thought we were absolutely nuts, and we didn't care. We knew what we were doing and why we were doing it. And so it just didn't make any difference what other people thought of us. And that's probably the second lesson that we learned, that if you're solid with each other, you're a team, you can really face life without worrying about what other people are thinking about and thinking about you. So that was important too for us to learn that. And while we were in college, we were on the starving student budget plan, and there was the opportunity to take ROTC. And they paid a little bit, so we took it because, man, that was extra money we could use. And then as he progressed in ROTC, they'd even teach you how to fly. And so that sounded like fun, something he wanted to do especially. We bantered it back and forth because the plan had always been, okay, his folks said he had to go to college, so that was 4 years, put putting the farming in the, the distance. If we went to, ROTC had a commitment with the military, well, that'd be another 4 years. Put the farming off for another 4 years. And anyway, we decided, go for it. It was a good thing. So I think the next lesson we learned was the fact that be flexible. If something comes up that will enhance your life, go for it. Do it. You can put off some goals later down the road. We were still really young. And to interrupt, but I don't have a picture here anymore. Does that make any difference?
You're still on.
You're good.
Yeah.
It's all right. Okay. All right. So that was a good thing that we could put off because we were young. And after we got into the military, we discovered we really liked the lifestyle. And with all the benefits, it made sense to make it a career. So then we decided we'd put off agriculture just a little bit more, like 20 years, and do that when we got done, because shoot, he'd still be just early 40s when he retired from the Air Force. And we could start the farming operation at that particular time. So we looked at our life as a whole, and that's a good lesson too, where we figured, the first 20 years of your life, you're really getting educated. And then the next 20 years is really family-based. You're raising your kids and surviving with whatever job you've got. And then from 40 to 60, you can be really productive doing whatever you want to do. And then from 60 to 80, you just enjoy the fruits of whatever that was that you decided to do. George had already planned from the beginning of the Air Force career that 5 years before retirement, he was going to decide with the family where we were going to live, what we were going to do, and we were going to get started on it. He had seen so many guys in the Air Force that finished their career and then floundered. They didn't know what they were going to do because they were just totally military. That was consuming. He did not want to be that person. He also didn't want to work for somebody else. So that was the goal. We would find something. And at that time, he was stationed at Holloman, but he was also assigned to the test group. And the policy was that if you were in the test group, and there weren't many bases to move to, so you could stay. So he finished his Air Force career the last 10 years at Holloman, which was wonderful for us because we could stay together and start whatever it was that we were going to start. And that was a tremendous plus. We liked it here. Golly, we liked the climate, we liked the people. We just, this is where we wanted to live. The only problem was there wasn't much farming around here, something to get into agriculture, extremely limited. So we have 3 kids, and that was the mission that George gave us, find something that grows in the desert. And so because the internet was in the early 70s, wasn't there, and but encyclopedias were. So we looked in encyclopedias to find out what desert countries exported. Apparently they had enough for their people, whatever the crop was, so that they could then share it by exporting. And we were amazed. There is a lot of agriculture that's being exported from desert countries. The Sinai is honestly, unbelievably productive. And so we made long list of crops, all the crops that came out of these deserts, and then did pros and cons, and which we thought would work here in Alamogordo. Pistachios came to the top of the list. It was a native desert crop. It was annual harvest. We could put it in cold storage. It would maintain freshness for a year. So it seemed like it was ideal. And also, when you start looking, you start finding. And Iran, the pistachio growing regions of Iran, we discovered were identical to the environment here in the Tularosa Basin. Unbelievable. Same altitude, same rainfall, same type of soil, everything was identical. So we figured if the Iranians could do it, by golly, we could do it here. We had gone over to the university, you know, to confirm all of our research that we had done, and talked to the folks over there, and they said, forget it. It isn't going to work. It's just not been done in this area, and don't waste your money. So we went back to the first lesson we had learned: do your homework, make your plan, and go after it with enthusiasm, because we were convinced, even though we had never seen a pistachio tree, that it could be done here. And we were up for it. And it was really interesting too at this same time. I think it's still that way, but the Holloman Wireless is extremely active. Word spreads fast through the base. And we got a call one night from a gentleman named Harvey Widener, and he said, hey, I hear you are looking for a desert crop. And we, yeah, right, sure. And he said, well, I found it. It's pistachios. And what we discovered, he had done all the same research we had done 2 years before. It was identical to what we had found. And Harvey had even planted 400 trees out here in the desert. And so besides planting these trees, he had a little greenhouse in his backyard in Alamogordo, and he was growing pistachio seedlings. So we decided with Harvey that we were going to buy those pistachio seedlings that he had in his backyard. Then we got another call from Harvey. He was working for a contractor out in base, and the contractor lost the contract. And so he said, just sell whatever you have here, because I'm never coming back here. And Harvey, you know, approached us and said, you know, you're the only people nuts enough to want this place with 400 pistachio trees. He said, anybody else that buys it can plow it under, because nobody believes it can be done here. Well, we believed it. And so we were excited because it put us 2 years ahead of time. Even though the trees were really rabbit chewed and didn't look real good, at least they had a 2-year-old root system. So that put us 2 years ahead of the game. So man, we were good with it. We thought it was the best deal on earth. And so that's another lesson. This was an opportunity. We've been doing our homework. And so, man, we jumped on it. We took it. So we had those trees, those 400 rabbit-chewed trees to start work on. And that was great.
Marianne?
Yeah.
You mentioned a while ago that you looked in the encyclopedia for some of our young ones. Could you explain to them what that is?
Oh, well, they have these books where they just take all these different subjects and alphabetize them in all kinds of categories. And you can look and find what is going on in the world. Tremendous source of information. Yeah.
So that was before computers.
You bet it was. But it worked. It worked. We found out what we wanted to know.
Marianne, I would like to know if you could turn the clock back to when you started your business here, what would you do different?
I don't believe we do anything different. It was exciting. You know, you can take on businesses that somebody else has started and not have to do all of the figuring out, but there is such personal satisfaction in having to figure something out. And I guess that's what really appealed to us in this venture, even though we didn't know how it was going to turn out, or if we were even going to make any money with it. We've always had the thought that money is just a tool, and you need tools to work with to accomplish things. but we'd always had other stuff on the side. We always had rental places and sold stuff. Man, we were even Amway distributors. We were big in that business, but it gave us tools that we could do other things with. And so we had the tools to work this business with. And if it didn't work, we'd always tell each other, shoot, only money. It's only money. We lose it all. But it was probably the best thing that we could have done for our family. The kids all worked. They learned how to work. You know, when we were expanding or starting the growth phase where we were putting in more trees, and we didn't have the money just to hire bunches of people, we would hire the kids' friends. The ball team, Gordon was playing ball at the high school, and they are always looking for fundraisers. So the ball team came out and planted trees for us as a fundraiser. We had the 4-H kids from Tularosa help us plant trees. We even had young airmen come out from the base and work on the farm. And we didn't have much money to pay them, but they would come and they were with their friends. They were outside. It was crazy. It was something really different. And I would cook, and I'd cook as much as they wanted to eat. So that was another lesson. Even if you don't have the money, there's people that will help you. And for other reasons, the benefits that they liked. So the money wasn't always the drawing card. And that was important for us to learn, because we had a lot of that. We really felt that as far as that growth phase, it was kid power. We used lots of kids, and it's heartwarming when those kids shoot their grandparents now, and they still feel like those trees are theirs. They put them in the ground, their sweat's in that ground, and they come back and they say, well, how's it going? You know, we've just been taking care of their trees. So that was fun.
Marianne, when you started your business, how much formal knowledge did you have of business, accounting, taxes, tax law, those kinds of things, payroll, HR matters?
None, none. We both could do math. We could add and subtract, and we knew how to figure that you had so much money to work with, and you had so many expenses, and that you had to have enough money to pay your expenses. So it was a learning curve the whole way, but we had confidence that we could do it. And honestly, I think because we were solid as a team, and we knew we discussed everything before we made a decision, and we'd always figure it out on paper. It wasn't just something that, you know, we had a fleeting thought that we could do it. We always wrote it down on paper and knew how we were going to make it work. But no, we didn't have any formal education, but there is so much help. Man, you can go, just like we did with the encyclopedias, to find a crop. You can go to all these different agencies, whatever, and people will help you figure it out. If they know you want to really learn, man, there's endless ways to get the information you need to have.
Okay, the next one we've got is the 7th lesson about take care of your health.
Yeah, and you know, that's what I was saying with the kids, man, eating and fixing everything, and the young airmen from the base. I still have a cookbook. They just eat like horses. And so I'd cook and some recipe, and we'd try it out, and everybody would evaluate it. I still have that cookbook where I have big goose eggs if nobody liked it, or the star if this was really good. But it's the same thing nowadays. We have, we think, benefits that our employees like. We have the Swift MD, which is a really super health coverage where they can talk to an emergency room doctor 24/7 all year long if they need it. Their birthday's a holiday, paid holiday on your birthday. And just different things that are appealing, not necessarily something that every business can do, but we try to figure out things that would appeal to the folks that were working with us. So that's why I'm saying, you know, it's talk about the benefits they like, and it's amazing what they can come up with. And as you're learning, for us, we weren't visionary. We didn't have an idea. We hadn't seen a pistachio tree, but we felt that we could do it, and it was agriculture, which was something that we loved, a lifestyle that we loved. And it's long hours and physical labor, but it's healthy. And so, again, what I was saying, as far as our kids were concerned, that was a healthy lifestyle to raise them. And did they complain? Of course. But did they work? Yeah, and they learned how to work. And when anyone asked them what they did, you know, they just say, well, we're the slave labor, you know, and that's what they still think they were. But they all know the business. They all could take it over, you know, they know it that well.
Marianne, have you found that employee turnover is costly for you?
Yeah, it's horrible. We figure every time an employee turns, it's cost us $500 just off the bat to advertise, find somebody else, train somebody, and whether or not that person works out. We're really, really fortunate in that a lot of the folks that have worked with us over the years have been here for years. And we have a number, I mean, our core employees have been with us 15 going on 20 years. So our biggest turnover, of course, is in retail. And I think that's true for all retail. That's kind of a revolving door. But that's just the nature of the beast. We expect that. But in our other areas, in the farming and the manufacturing, the processing, we don't have much turnover.
How about lesson number 8?
Oh, that give yourself credit for figuring it out and know that you're going to make mistakes in the process, and that's okay. Because we didn't know anything about pistachios when we got into the business, we never had that bug of confidence that we knew it all. It's still a learning curve. Amazing how much there is to learn. And California was about 10 years ahead of us in the industry. This is a fairly brand new industry to the United States, but they were about 10 years ahead. And so we would make an annual trip out to California and look at what they were doing, learn from them, and they were wonderful, absolutely wonderful about sharing information. And that's where all the machinery was, you know, for processing pistachios. So we would go out there and, you know, look at the equipment, look at the machinery, come back home, and then fabricate it here. And, you know, when you look at something, you don't see all of the intricate workings inside of it. But, and so that was taken for granted. We knew we weren't going to get it right the first time, but somewhere along the line, we'd get it right. Our son, Gordon, made a lot of the fabrication, fabricated a lot of the equipment and taught himself to be a really good welder. And he'd sit at the kitchen table and we'd tell him what we saw in California. And then he'd draw it out, like you're going to do a dress design, you know, you draw it out on graph paper and then make it in cardboard, a big, whatever it was, whatever big thing he was going to make out of cardboard sheets. And then we'd buy sheets of steel and cut out the steel to his cardboard design that he'd started with his little paper graph at the kitchen table and fabricate equipment. So we saved a lot of money, but we made a lot of mistakes and we never felt bad about it. We just figured that in. That was just part of our learning. We were going to make mistakes. It's okay. So that was our 8th lesson. Yeah.
Marianne, have you learned more from your successes or your mistakes, and why?
Well, always, always, I think you learn more from the mistakes because, and what was so good is that when we were learning about pistachios was we knew from the get-go we didn't know anything. We just had the confidence that we could learn it. And so, you know, making mistakes was just obviously going to be part of the course, but we would learn and we make it better. And gosh, we could almost bet, you know, that how many mistakes we were going to make before we got it right. And the pistachios were wonderful. We really respect this tree. We always say the trees thrived in spite of us instead of because of us. Yeah, hardy old desert tree, and it had to be hardy to withstand us because we would do different things that to the trees, what we thought, you know, back in Nebraska, farming was corn and soybeans and hogs and cattle, and it just absolutely didn't fit with tree growing at all. And we would have consultants from California come out, pay them out, you know, to come out and tell us what to do. And they just say, well, just tie George up in the house. You know, he's still got that Nebraska mentality of farming corn, and this isn't corn. And so he'd take it. And even though he had been, you know, really a successful farmer in Nebraska, this was so different, but he was willing to take it, you know, and learn it. It's okay. Yeah. More mistakes learned than success learning, for sure.
Marianne, I noticed that just close to your business is another pistachio place. I would like to know how you feel about that and your views on competition.
Okay, well, McGinn's, the story with that is George was in the Air Force, and Charlie McGinn was also in the Air Force, and we were friends. Charlie had a brother, Tom, who wanted to invest out here in New Mexico. And so Tom hired us to plant his first trees and manage those trees until he retired from his business. He was a plant manager out in New Jersey. And that was great. We were all alone in this industry. There wasn't any support as far as established, processing plants or people that knew the business. We had to get everything out of California. And we were just thoroughly, thoroughly happy to have another pistachio grower that we could talk to. So it was a good thing. And then as the businesses both grew and were side by side, the competition came in as we had crops. But that's a good thing too. We believe in competition. We think everybody sharpens when you have a competitor. It's a good thing. Do you notice Home Depot and Lowe's Hardware always try to build their stores side by side? They do that for a reason, because they have learned a long time ago that competition is good for both businesses. And we feel the same way. Man, we were glad to see that big nut go up. That's an attraction, and it draws people to our area. And sure, they go over to McGinn's to shop, but they stop and shop here too. The fact that we have more businesses on this highway between Alamogordo and Tularosa is a good thing. Man, when we first started, there just wasn't anything out here. People didn't think there was any life north of Kmart. And now, as businesses grow and establish on this highway between Alamo and Tularosa, more people travel. There's more things to see and do when they come out. So as far as we're concerned, we really appreciate it. We think it's a good thing.
What's it like to be married to your business partner? Because that doesn't happen all the time.
Well, another lesson learned. You really have to define your roles. Who's responsible for what? Because even though you discuss it, there always has to be the deciding factor, who the last decision, and you're not always going to agree. And we certainly haven't. And but what we did agree on was that whatever George's role was, what he was responsible for, we discuss it, but if I didn't agree, his decision held. And that's the way it is with what I'm responsible for. Like I have the marketing and the stores and so on. And we discuss it, but if he doesn't agree what I think ought to be done, he keeps his mouth shut. And my decision holds. So at the end of the day, we sit down with a glass of wine at the kitchen table and talk about what went on in each one of our worlds. But we don't try to run the other person's world. And I think that has been a real important lesson to learn, that we've got a partner that's pretty smart, knows what they're doing. And even though we don't agree with it all the time, you make sure that you keep your mouth shut when you don't agree and go with the flow. It works. Yeah.
Marianne, if I remember correctly, you told me one time a freeze hit your farm, and on one side of the highway it froze and the other side it didn't.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming that that set you back when that happened. Right now, there's a lot of people in business having setbacks with this COVID-19. So tell me a little bit about how you handled that when you lost your crop, and how you might apply that towards how you're dealing with the COVID-19 now with your business.
Well, for us, it's a little bit different in that everything is an annual harvest. So you have money coming in once a year. And so you have to budget that money out over a year's time. And so it was a little different training than for someone who has money coming in every month from a paycheck, where you're not quite required to think that far ahead. And the other part of this is farmers need a good banker behind them. And we use Farm Credit over in Las Cruces, which has been a really great backer for us. And we have a line of credit that we can draw on. And that's exactly what we did with the freeze. We had been with our banker for a long time, and they are specific bankers for farmers. So they understood when you lose a crop that you're not going to have that income. And so they just upped the loan, and of course you got to pay it back, but at least it's a source that you can live on, and you just tighten your belt on everything until you get through the crunch. And for the COVID-19, we're having that same issue now, especially with the stores. We've got, we have the store over at the Farm and Ranch Museum in Las Cruces, which of course the governor closed all the museums down immediately. So that store was closed. We have another store over at the plaza in Nicia, and that's for all practical purposes. The plaza is closed with the stores open, but very little business. And the same way with the store here on the farm. The store here is open, and the CDC, of course, said all places that sold food and were food processors, which we are, had to remain open and should keep a normal schedule. But with the lockdown, the stay at home, you don't have any customers. So the result's the same. And it's our leverage, of course, is the same thing. We have a good line of credit, so we use that. But same thing, we have, some folks that didn't want to work because they didn't feel safe just being out, were allowed not to work. We have other folks that need to work and want every hour they can. And so what we did at the very beginning of this whole scenario was sat folks down and said, how many hours do you need to pay your bills? And they'd figure it out and tell us, and then, okay, that's your hours. And then we just work our schedule around it. And because we don't have any customers or to speak of, you know, we have a few, but not many, then this is the time we are doing maintenance like you can't believe. We got the shipping department all torn down, took all the conveyors out. The girls in the office just finished painting the walls yesterday. So our folks are busy. They're just doing entirely different things than they certainly did before this whole thing started.
Marianne, you mentioned earlier some different age brackets like 20 to 40, 40 to 60. Your last one here, your last lesson is about you won't live forever, so plan ahead. Now, I know that you just turned 60, so I would like to to know what your plan is now that we're talking past the 60-year mark.
Okay, well, we started out, you know, it's George and I making all the decisions. Okay, well then that we kind of outgrew that. And so then we went to a corporate management system where we had a corporate manager. And after a while, well, that didn't work out, he left. And so we went to a team management concept. And so what we have is our managers that different departments, we have a managers meeting once a week, every Thursday morning, in fact, it's managers meeting. And we discuss all the business issues and we make decisions by consensus. So we have a team of managers that everyone knows the other's departments, what's going on, and how we make decisions. They're absolutely, they have a vote just as strong as ours. The kids are coming to run the business. You know, we have old kids. We're in our 80s, so our kids are just turning 60. And what the plan is that they will, even at that late age, come back and be responsible for the business. But they have a management team in place that has been making sound decisions for the business for years. And even though they haven't been on site, our kids haven't been on site, they've been involved. Our daughter up in Rio Doso she has their family has the Cork and Kettle, which is another store which carries all of our products. She also does all of our print advertising, our catalogs, you know, all of that stuff. So she really knows that. Our son lives in Florida with his family, and he's responsible for the shopping cart, that store that's online. So he's all, you know, in that phase where he's been doing this for years. So it's not like they have not been active in some facet of the business. So we really feel like, we told the staff the other day, you know, we think we've got everything lined up. So when we pass on, not going to be such a big deal. And they know what to do, and our kids know what to do, and you've got to plan ahead. And that's where we're at.
Okay, thank you. I would like to know about how important your attorney and your accountants are for your business success.
Okay, well, when we started estate planning a number of years ago, and then we put together a team for that. And that's, we have, you know, the insurance guy, we've got the attorneys, and we have the CPA. And when we want to do something or whatever, they're all involved as how we can best do that. So we have a management team that is for the business, but we also have a team that everything's in a trust and try to, you know, figure it out the best way. You know, just what you were saying, did we know any of this stuff? No, but it's okay. There's people out there that know this stuff, and you can go to them and hire them, of course, for a price, but it's worth it. That you can find out how to do this stuff. You don't have to know it all.
I'm going to let everybody know in a couple of minutes. I'm going to open this up to questions on the chat part of Zoom. So if you want to ask a question, you can send it that way, or you can text me at 430-0548. Marianne, if you had a young couple that was in their 20s and they were wanting to start a business, tell me a few things you would share with them to make the decision as to whether they would really, or they should really do that or not.
Well, number one, are you both going to be involved in the business? And we certainly have folks that come out and ask that question. If you are, you both got to be on the same page. If you're just buying a business or starting a business for something for your kids to do, we always tell them to forget it. Don't do it. You want to do this for yourself and make your decisions on a together basis. But do your homework. Golly, that's so important. Make a plan and then figure it out how that plan will work. And what we've found, especially with farming, is that it appeals to one person in the couple and not the other. And we dissuade them. It's too risky to not be together and in your decision making if it's going to be a family business. But again, just like what we did, because shoot, we hadn't seen a pistachio tree at age 40 yet, and we didn't have any problem admitting we didn't know anything, but we figured we could learn. And that's the same thing with any business. You go to the people that are successful in that business and pick their brains, learn from them, and then just hard work together.
So when your life is said and done, what would you like your legacy to be?
Well, the legacy that we see happening, which pleases us a lot, is when we have 7 grandkids, and when we had a family policy. When they reached the age of 12, they could come live with us in the summertime. And those kids would come and they had jobs, because at 12, they want to earn money, but there's no way to earn money when you're 12. So we had the perfect setup where we had a business going and we could put those kids in different departments, and they had a supervisor who evaluated them. They punched a time clock. We told them right away, we're not going to wake you up in the morning. If you want this job, you got to hustle, be there, get your breakfast, and be at work on time. And they all learned to work to be a good employee from 12 to 16. Those kids all worked here at that age group. And so for legacy, the most impressive, I think, we always told the kids, if you know how to work, you'll never have any competition. You will always be in demand. Learn your lessons, work hard, be a good employee, whether you have your own business or work for somebody else. And so those grandkids are our legacy, that they are all different places in the world, but they all have good jobs and they're good employees. That's for us is really gratifying.
Thank you. I have a question here that somebody sent to me. It said, how would you recommend finding, saving, or getting the money to get a business started?
Well, as I said, we thought money is a tool. And so we always had something going on the side. Besides having our jobs, we would, get into a situation and watch. George is the only man I know that reads the legals in the paper. How boring is that? But he always read the legal section of the newspapers. And if we spotted something where somebody was foreclosing or doing something that we thought, that looked like an opportunity, then we would, research that out so that we always had some additional income coming in besides what our jobs were. And that's what we saved. And that's like we were Amway distributors. You can work that in the evenings, but we had income over and above of our bill paying jobs that we could utilize to work with. And that's what we saved. And that's what we started our operation out here with, is actually the money we earned in Amway. Amazing, huh? It doesn't take all that much if you just are a little astute as far as your planning is concerned. But money's a tool. You've got to have tools.
Thank you. I hear a lot in the news right now about socialism. I'd like to know what you think about that.
It will destroy us, absolutely destroy us. AOC, I heard last night where she was saying, we should just keep this up. Nobody go back to work. Who on earth is just going to supply the government with the money? The government only has the money that it takes from people. It's not a generating revenue entity. So in socialism, eventually the money runs out and then the nation is broke. And that's what you see in Venezuela, you see in these other countries. It's horrible. And man, we just have to fight against it. Capitalism may have its problems, but by golly, it doesn't have near the problems that socialism has. That's my 2 cents.
I knew you'd be shy about talking about that.
Yeah.
The next question is, with current and with employees these days, what kinds of behaviors do you see that are problems that keep them from being successful as employees working for you?
Well, the thought process that you're owed something. I don't know that it's just the employees we have, because we have some really great employees, but some of the employees that don't make it have that attitude. I was thinking of a young kid that came in. I interviewed him for a job, and I was ready to hire him, interviewed pretty well. And I said, now one of the rules is that you cannot have your cell phone with you when you're working. And he looked at me and he said, you can't do that. You can't take my cell phone. That's my right. I said, well, it's very distracting, and I have the right not to hire you because you're not willing to follow the rules. And of the folks that haven't made it or only last a short time, that's kind of been it. They're owed. They have a lot of rights to stuff. I was training one person on the cash register, and while I'm trying to train them on the cash register, she's texting to someone else. And I didn't really make it. So, but the folks, my gosh, we've got some great folks here. I just can't tell you how much we think of the folks that work with us, and they're really good. But do some of them not make it? You bet. We're really strict as far as the standards are concerned. And no, not everybody makes it. They just don't. But it's usually because of that attitude.
So the lady that was texting while you were training her, I'm assuming she's not one of your managers right now.
No, she's not. She lasted maybe 1 week, and we said, oh, this just is not a fit. Just not a fit, right?
Okay, the last question I've got is, when you're interviewing somebody, what kinds of things do you look for?
Okay, we look for, we'll ask them, who was your favorite boss? And they'll tell us, and we, why? And also your favorite job, why? And you learn a lot just from those couple of questions. We also, just the demeanor during an interview. If they're sloppy and they're chewing gum and they're, got their phone right on their hip ready to take a call. And we've had that happen where somebody, oh, excuse me, I've got a call in the middle of an interview. And took the call. It was her mother. And so, they just give you red flags all over the place by how their persona is during that interview. So it's a self-critiquing thing real fast. Yeah.
Well, Marianne, I think we'll wrap this up for today. Do you have any last, we may have one more here. Give me just a second, one more question. I had somebody that texted me and it said, please tell Marianne that I worked for her as a laborer back in 2009. I was on the grape harvest crew, and even that job, I learned quite a bit about hard work. Our large crew dwindled down each day, but if you stuck through it, that taught you a lot about great work ethic. Thank you to Marianne and George. You guys are a blessing to this community. How's that?
How sweet. That is wonderful. That's great. Thank you.
You bet. Well, Marianne, thank you for your time today. I think this is very helpful. I'm very grateful to have you in our community. I think you and George, with your business and your wisdom and your interaction in the community, is just a huge plus. So congratulations to you and George.
Thank you very much.
All
We
right.
appreciate being here.
All right. Well, thank you, Marianne. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
Okay. Okay.